This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. Today, I am joined by the impressive Anat Hassner. Anat is currently the Chief People Officer at Uniting, a large Australian nonprofit doing incredible work. She has had an extremely impressive career studying a PhD in change management and working across transformation, change, and people and culture in some of Australia's largest organisations. I am so looking forward to delving into this conversation. Anat, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
And thank you so much for joining me. We do have a mutual contact in Ashley who very kindly put us in touch, and I've been so looking forward to this conversation. So as I said to you before, your background is fascinating to me. I would love for context to kind of kick us all off, for you to give me a little bit of an idea of your career and role sort of as it stands today. We'll delve into the background in a bit, but yeah, give us a little idea and insight into your role as CPO at Uniting.
So I've been the Uniting CPO for the past year and a few months. I joined last July, just as COVID finished, and my career has been a little bit mixed, with the beginning of my career starting in the change management world, and my PhD is in change management, and I've got an org psych degree, which is focused on organizational development and change management. And I guess I would probably split my career into four parts. There's the time I spent doing change management and within organizations and within corporates. Then there was the time I spent doing a lot of consulting. So that's HR consulting, transformation consulting, and change management consulting in general. Then I spent a chunk of my career just being in academia and lecturing and really expanding the field of change management and making sure I understand it better.
Yeah.
And finally, I had the opportunity to go into government as a Chief People Officer, which I did in 2018. And I spent 3.5 years in government doing change management, Chief People Officer related roles. And then, I had a little stint in a construction firm, and realized that I'm more suited to for-purpose organizations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And even as you say that, I love how you are so concisely able to articulate the different chunks of your career, but it's non-linear. That is like 4 people's different lifetimes in there.
Well, it depends. If I was a baby boomer, that would be true. But if I was a Gen Zer, that would be just like part of the course, right?
This is very true. This is very true. And I would love to touch on when I sort of was researching what you have achieved and your background, the thing that I really honed in on is the PhD and the academia side of things, because as a recruiter, we deal with, obviously, and I deal with so many people across the people and culture space, people in your position in other organizations, and often comes with that degrees and masters. But I think that real academic route, the leaning into kind of going down the road. My partner actually has a PhD in urban planning and town planning, and it is not easy. It is not an easy road to to get to that. So how was that process? And do you think, you mentioned before that obviously it was helping you understand the space. Do you think it was pivotal in getting into the change kind of space and consulting area?
Do you know, when I started my PhD in change management, I had a really fixed idea of the need to educate people about driving change within organizations. And my thinking was, how can you possibly run all these projects and not take into consideration the people aspect of the change? And that's back in 2000, in the year 2000. That's when I started on this journey. And it was very clear to me that there needs to be a change manager, like a role called change manager. And I think that was pretty self-servicing, if I'm completely honest. and
Here
part
I am.
of my hello.
Guess
and
what? You had
and
one.
funnily and funnily my PhD is titled "Who is the Change Manager?"
Is the answer Anat?
Well, that's what I was
that
trying to allude to. But that was a really strongly held view by me when I started. And then when I finished my PhD, my strongly held view was actually there shouldn't be a change manager. And it's the role of every single manager within an organization to drive change, whether that's strategy of the organization and or whether that's to keep improving, ongoing improvement, or whether that's putting new systems. Doesn't matter. Managers need to lean in to driving change rather than just holding the fort or turning the wheels. And that's where my brain has pivoted to. It's pivoted from we need that as a function to we really need to do better, and every manager in every organization has to be able to drive change.
Well, look at the 2020 experience, and what was that if not an entire global change management process where every single one of us went, okay, this is a different approach. This is an entire change management process.
Yeah, and to that point, the things that COVID has thrown up in terms of the requirement now for organizations to really think about how they transform are significant, and we're still grappling with do we allow full-time working from home? Do we tell people to come back to the office? There's still a huge amount of confusion around that. And to this day, I still have executive conversations about what's the right answer here. My current answer is I don't want to do hot desking. Because there's constantly that push to get into hot desking because there's inconsistent footprint in the offices. And so my number one priority is not to move to hot desking unless you can give people a really good experience with technology. And that's not the case in 99% of the organizations. They're not set up for hot desking. So, for people to have to come in and chase after a keyboard is not a great experience. And because, the title of my function is people experience, I'm all about making sure that people in organizations can focus on the work that they're doing rather than, chasing things that enable them to do their work.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And of course, from the commercial standpoint, you can see why organizations don't want to have a fixed set desk for everyone. And the way that we're working now, we have capacity in the office of probably 40-50% of what it was, obviously varying business to business. And so it does make sense as a financial solution, but exactly that, the people experience side of things absolutely has to be a strong consideration, because if we're trying to encourage collaboration and face-to-face time, but at the same time having these kind of technological barriers is actually a deterrent, people won't come in, they'll stay at home, and then we lose culture, and then we lose collaboration, and then we lose training, and by osmosis, like there's so much that is lost. And I'm all for progressive ways of working. I am the absolute advocate for remote working and hybrid, but I think I agree with you. I think it has to be done in a way where it's set up for people rather than
It starts with the people in mind as opposed to, we need to manage the footprint. That's not like the office the amount of people in the office shouldn't be the driver for that decision,
Yeah.
from my perspective.
Mhm.
The other part of it is that, you know, we've got all these in big corporations, in big corporates, we've got a whole bunch of systems that have been integrated and tacked onto each other and, you know, pulled together and customized to align to very poor processes. And we're giving people a really bad experience as a result of that as well.
Mhm.
So when you look at Gen Zers, who are the, you know, the natives, the digital natives, and their expectation for things just to work.
Yep.
And then you look at boomers who are in love with their printers. You really do have a massive gap with these 5 generations. You really, so there are so many opportunities for us as a result of these changing environments. There are so many opportunities for us to shift the dial, to transform, to do things differently.
Yeah.
Because it's just not, it's not there.
Yeah, I completely agree.
We can get there, but we need to really think about how we do that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I run a business of 20 people. We have a team here that are so tech. We've a mix of different generations, but very tech focused, very processy, very which is rare for recruiters, but very system optimization focused in how we work, and that definitely stems from me as well. And so I'll only implement a tech platform if I know we're going to optimize it, and I know we're going to use it, and I know there's going to be adoption, and I know the implementation goes really, really well. And even at that, there's so much to sit on with that. There's so much weight on that. And then I think about that at scale in larger organizations. I only have SME experience personally. I think about that at scale and just think how how do you even go? And I suppose that's where your change management comes in for tech transformations. But it's a big project. And I'd love to find out from you. Change is such a, these days, I mean, as I said, it was absolutely a prevalent sort of topic and role during COVID, but back in 2000, when you were sort of looking at it and studying it, it definitely wasn't as prevalent as an area as it is now. What made you even go into that area? Because it's relatively niche, I imagine, at the time where you were going into it.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really interesting because I was doing my master's in organizational psychology. And I wanted to do placement, and I found placement in a company called Compaq Computer at the time. That was sold off to HP. And Compaq Computers had a head of organizational development, a gentleman called Tom White, who was a PhD in change management. And he, excuse me, he mentored me. And he gave me the appetite and the understanding of change management. So that was my first job. And then I moved to work for Rail Infrastructure, which is a trains organization in New South Wales. And it's no longer Rail Infrastructure. It's changed many times as a result of government changes. But Rail Infrastructure, when I joined, I called myself a change manager. I went into a role of an organizational development coordinator, but I called myself a change manager because you could just do that at that, you know, back in those days. And I had people say to me, "Are you the person giving change on the platform, on the train platform?"
I love
So
that. So you've
no one,
invented change manager as a title.
yeah. So no one knew what that was back
Yeah.
in 2002.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like when that whole idea of I really need to turn this into a profession started in my mind.
Yeah.
And then I found my crew, I found my tribe with a few other people that caught on to the idea that change management is a thing. And then we had the Change Management Institute and worked together on the Change Management Institute, which existed for a period of time and really built that profession. And through that journey is where I kind of went, you know what, we are being pushed to do small projects and comms and training. And that's not what I meant when I started this this journey. That's not what I meant. And then I thought, who is driving change? Who are the people that are sitting at the table and making decisions about how to drive change and how to prioritize people in when it comes to driving change? And that's kind of how I started getting closer and closer to HR and landed in chief people officer roles.
Yeah, that makes sense. And did you feel like when you were studying that and studying your PhD and you knew that there was sort of uncharted territory in a way, you said the career path hadn't been laid out in front of you, did you know that your sort of North Star was people, that you knew that it had to be work with the people first and then kind of build things around that? Or did that come in time as you started to explore HR?
I knew it was people. I didn't know it was HR.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And I thought my career would lead into more transformation space, because I saw that change management was being pushed into that kind of reporting into project manager and doing comms and training. But I also saw that the heads of transformation and leaders of transformation were getting a bigger slice of the pie and are getting the opportunity to really change organizations and make a big difference strategically. And they tended to work more closely with the CEOs and the C-suite. And that's where I was driving my career. But I just got offered an opportunity to go into government as a chief people officer after I was at Woolworths for 3 years driving transformation. So I thought, this is really interesting and opportunistic, and I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity.
Absolutely. And so much of what you would have done up until that point would easily translate into that type of role where, as you say, it's kind of, okay, I'm in HR and now I can apply everything that I've learned and I am making an impact.
You would think that.
Yeah.
You would think that. But I quickly discovered,
of me, wasn't it?
I quickly discovered that was not the case, even not a little bit. And when I went into the chief people officer role in government, I was really in over my head in terms of the HR knowledge. So I had a lot of growing and learning to do in the HR space. And certainly when it came to policies and pay and industrial relations, the technical side of people and culture was something that I had to learn very fast, and it was a whole language.
I can imagine. Did you have within that, as someone as accomplished and educated and experienced as you, did you have moments of imposter syndrome going, oh my goodness, I'm leading this function that I need to learn?
I only had moments of imposter syndrome. I don't think I had anything but moments of imposter syndrome. I think if I hadn't, I'd be completely delusional, because I was sitting in executive meetings, and half of what was being said, I really struggled to understand, if I'm completely honest. I know this is only back in 2018, but I had a massive learning curve, and I put all the effort into making sure that I understand exactly what was being discussed, and that I come to the table with additional value from a HR perspective. But that, it was, the beginning was hard.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's interesting to hear someone who is as experienced as you, and as I said, has had this amazing career. There's such human feelings. We've all had it. I set up my business at 27, and for many years I had this, and often still do now, in certain environments, this feeling of imposter syndrome of oh my God, when is someone going to find me out? And I'm 27, 28, kind of running this business, and it's becoming really successful, and oh my goodness, when am I going to be dragged away kicking and screaming because people are onto me? And so it's interesting, and I think we ran a leadership training training recently with about 8 of the leaders here at Lotus. I facilitated and ran it over the course of 8 weeks, and it was a mix of different levels. And a couple of my team are incredibly confident and extroverted and come across like they kind of never have a concern. And as we sat in that leadership training and people, we spoke about Brené Brown and the importance of vulnerability, and people really opened up about their insecurities and their lack of confidence in certain areas. And it was one of those moments where everyone went, yeah, wow, okay, I'm not alone. It's not just not just me. So it is relatable, and it definitely resonates being able to hear you say that you did go through that. Do you find that research and educating yourself and really just honing in on and focusing in on what you knew the skills gap were, is that kind of what got you into the flow of things?
I think what got me into the flow of things is not letting myself off the hook.
I love that.
So that isn't just about, it's not just about the effort, but it's also about not letting my ego get in my way, being really honest with myself about my mistakes, and not trying to blame other people, and really being clear about everything is within my control. And if everything is within my control, how am I going to steer this ship? You know, and the more I kind of leaned into that and opened that space up in my mind, the better I got. And so, you know, not letting myself off the hook in terms of putting blame on others, or expecting things to just fall in my lap, or not being accountable for the things that I'm accountable for, is probably what has helped me progress and evolve and develop. And that's not to say that I've arrived, you know, that I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm still a work in progress, but I do feel like I have a lot more to give than I did back in the beginning of my HR journey.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And I think that growth mindset, that ability to know that it's the mindset of the Stoics. It's the idea that we can control, we can work our way through the obstacles, we can keep moving. And I think it's absolutely the approach to have if you want to progress, if you want to remain stagnant, if you want to allow blame and lack of accountability and everything else to come into play, you're just going to have a harder time of it. Do you find that when you, as a leader, and that's obviously your mindset, which is fantastic, when you have people underneath you who perhaps are more fixed in their mindset or struggle to get there, is there any advice or any coaching that you can give them to sort of get them across the line? Because I think nature and nurture experience, we all have different ways of showing up in the world, and sometimes it can be harder for people to get into that frame of mind on their own.
Yeah, there's probably 3 things that I use. One is questioning. So rather than telling people what I can see, I ask them questions to kind of help them steer. And that's easier said than done, because knowing how to ask a good question is I think a skill.
Yeah.
The second is I use a lot of analogies. So I take them out of the work and into a different world, and a world that they can really relate to, that's not work, and try and use their creative and creativity and imagination to think about what it would be like outside of work, and then use that logic, apply that logic into work. And the third one is I use examples from myself. So I find that if I talk about my own journey, people can align, you know, people hear that better than if you talk about them. So the effort is about depersonalizing the situation or the story, and using other levers to create the understanding and the knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're amazing tips, and it's all well and good. I think in being a leader and in focusing on there's two aspects, there's two facets. There's growth of self, and I think in running a business for the last 8 years and from a young age, it has been the best container for growth. My goodness, the amount that I've learned, the amount that I've grown, it's been incredible. But then obviously on the flip side of that, it's the growth of those around you. And I'm a firm believer in personal growth and self-reflection and self-development results in those around you being able, it's a ripple effect. It results in you being able to support those around you in life and in business in a stronger way, I think. So I completely agree with you, and I absolutely love what you said about the kind of everything being within my control, because that is something that we can so easily fall out of. We can so easily tip into a place where the external factors are something that's driving us instead. And it's funny, it's I was laughing as you were saying about you're not quite done yet. It's I keep waiting for enlightenment to happen. I'm like, am I there yet? I've put in the work.
Do you know, one of the things, just on the control piece, one of the things that I have found consistent when it comes to certainly leaders at this level is that there's a lot of frustration because you're so used to controlling things and doing things your way. And you're also used to people just doing what you tell them to do. But again, this is where the world has moved. You know, command and control is not it's just not really a thing anymore. And the new place of work expects influence and engagement. And so knowing that if you have a really strong view and the people around you don't share that view, it doesn't mean that your view is wrong, nor does it mean that you need to get frustrated and kind of feel like everyone else is silly. All it means is that you need to put more effort and more patience into expressing, communicating, engaging, and influencing to get to where you need to get to. Because the more you do that, if your answer is wrong, you will find that along the way, and you will slowly change your mind. But that is the work. That is the work of a leader. And the more leaders understand that, the less frustrated they will be about not getting their way.
Yeah, 100%. And it's exactly what you mentioned earlier around ego. I think it is to be a leader, to be in, whether it's corporate, whether it's government, to be in a position of perceived power or to have control over your career and be driven to get to a certain level. There is an element of ego that comes with that. And I think the constant work is precisely what you've just said, but balancing that ego and making sure that you can check it, and you're not being ego driven. You are looking inward and going, okay, this is happening, where's this coming from, what place is this coming from, and how do I question it? And yeah, just keeping yourself in check with it. And I think that's every individual in any environment. But I think as you go further up the ladder and as you start to look at these sort of C-suite execs in massive companies and everything, you often do, and I know my own personal experience recruiting for these businesses, it can be very ego led. And I think that's where they're surrounded by yes people, and there isn't a whole lot of feedback, critical feedback being shared the other way. It's kind of, as you said, going in the other direction.
Yeah, that's exactly spot on. And I always think about the example that I saw in Qantas 15 years ago. I know Qantas isn't the best organization to be quoting right now, but 15 years ago, I went and visited, did a tour of Qantas, the air traffic control. And one of the things that really resonated for me is that they said that the baggage handler can stop a plane. And I thought, if every organization had that mentality of, you know, the lowest worker in the hierarchy, the lowest level of hierarchy can stop the organization, that creates a culture where that kind of critical feedback is really accepted and leveraged and used for improvement. And that's what you want. And that's where ego moves out of the way.
Exactly. And I think that is the mode that we're in now. I think that one of the biggest drivers, I think actually I was listening to a tech podcast with it was the New York Times tech podcast Hard Fork, and they were talking about Elon Musk and how in the Twitter handover, they were saying for us, psychological safety is everything. How we treat our people is everything. And I think it was the guy who actually wrote the biography about Elon Musk recently, but he basically said he leads with, Elon Musk does, psychological danger. He believes that people should be fearful at work. He believes that people should be afraid that they might lose their job. They need to work under these conditions in order to get the best out of them. And I think that is such an outdated way of working. Everything that we see, we're so privy to so many amazing organizations, and psychological safety and trust and everything you've just mentioned around that. Every person at every rung and level of the business is as valued as the other. That is really the way forward. And I think those organizations who aren't leaning into that are being, Twitter aside, being left behind, or X. So yeah, I think it is absolutely essential.
Yeah, like people have choices, right? And at the end of the day, you don't end up with the best people if you don't value them. It's very simple.
Yeah, exactly right. And one of the things that I do want to touch on, and you mentioned it before, I mean, this podcast is all about passion and purpose, and feeling like when you're doing the work that you're doing, it's it isn't work, and it's feeling like it's coming from a place of heart. With your experience in multiple industries, and you've obviously touched on government, you've touched on private sector, and obviously you've landed in nonprofit. Tell me a little bit about the purpose of what has you in that space. Like, what does that mean to you? What were the drivers and motivators to kind of say? And it's obvious to some extent, but it's also going to be different from you to another person.
Yeah, no, I actually, I didn't see myself in a not-for-profit. I kind of stumbled onto this, and it like, you know, in hindsight, I look at it and I go, wow, this was so obvious and in the cards. But at the same time, I wasn't driving towards it. What I, you know, when I left the construction company that I was a part of, I interviewed for a few different roles, and every interview that I went into, when they said, what are you passionate about, it was always, you know, it was always purpose. It was always, I never want to end up in a place that isn't driven solely by purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so kind of in hindsight, there's no surprise that I ended up in a for-purpose organization, but that wasn't where I was necessarily navigating to. I think it was, it was kind of meant to be.
Yeah.
And now that I'm here, and now that I can see the impact and how happy I am doing this work and how fulfilled it makes me, you know, one day I won't need to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that day is that far off, but I also think that I will never not want to have the impact that I can have through what I'm doing. I never want to not feel satisfied by being able to help people and grow people and drive strategic outcomes. And you know, I'm Israeli, so I come from a place that's very, very hard to win in. It's very hard to win in Israel, and seeing Australia and the opportunities here, it's just such a contrast, and it gives you the sense like you can really win here.
Yeah.
Not
you have.
not personal winning, like, you know, shared collective winning.
Yeah.
And that excites me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like there is an energy of the place where there, as you said, there's a lot of opportunity. We have an office in the city near Wynyard, and because we're only doing hybrid, there's a few days a week where the office is empty. And so our charity partner, an amazing youth homelessness organization called Stepping Stone House, they were actually, because donations have dropped, cost of living has increased, etc., they had to finish their lease unexpectedly. And so they've come in, and they're now in our office 3 days a week, and we have a day of crossover, and they're all in here today. And it's just, I said to one of them just actually before I came into this conversation, I was saying, for us, it's so important. We do a lot of work with nonprofits as recruiters, and of course we align values, etc. But having a charity sit here and watching them fundraise for their kind of big annual event where they sleep out and all the other work that they're doing, it just keeps them front of mind for us. And so we're helping them with recruitment, where they're using our digital marketing manager as a resource, and all of this sort of thing where I think good can come from it. And I think that kind of opportunity, it comes from having an open mind around it as well. And so I agree with you on that point. And it's important to have impact. I think if we don't have impact in what we're doing day to day, it's like, the blue zones. I don't know if you've ever read anything about the blue zones. It's all of the areas around the globe where people live to over 100, and they've studied and done the research of the blue zones. And one of the main things that keep people going, and it could be as small and as simple as nurturing or tending to your garden or having a little market stall, but every single day you have an impact. Every single day you have something to contribute. So I do think that is a very important thing.
And people are recognizing that more and more. And that's the other shift that's happened as a result of COVID, more so than any other time, is that realization that, you want to do something that is meaningful to you and not just make other people rich. I mean, sure, you've got to do that as well.
Yeah.
And we have to build the economy, and we have to build wealth. But also, more and more people are going, it's just not enough. Yeah. It's just not enough. Yeah. At least some of my role has to be about purpose, if not all of my role.
Yeah.
And so I'm really, really fortunate that I've got this role, and I don't for a second, underestimate that privilege.
Mm-hmm. And the final question that I want to ask you, because it is something that I think whenever I look at people who are at the top of their careers, they've had amazing experiences and roles. How on earth do you do it all? The burnout. I'm so aware of burnout. I am so aware of everything that happened in the pandemic. I'm always juggling a million things, and that's me in my role in my small business. How do you navigate that sort of, and how do you work with that sort of switching off and having your own personal life as well as the work life in this way that we work now, where it's all so integrated?
You're probably not going to love my answer, but I think people who have a desire to play at this level need to know that there's sacrifices, right? Yeah. And that's what life is about: compromises and sacrifices with whatever it is that you choose to do. And I made a choice to be at a very intense space in my career. And so the sacrifice is on the personal life. I can't say that I have an extraordinarily colorful personal life. Yeah. I try to really focus on holidays. Yes. But other than that, it is really hard to switch off, and it is really hard to, maintain a social network. And that's just the decision you make. Yeah. I think when people say, oh, you've got to have it all, or I can have it all, then I applaud them. But I'm personally not someone who would say I've got it all. I would say I made some tough decisions along the way, and I stand by those decisions. This is what I wanted to do, and this is the impact I wanted to have, and and I've done it at the expense of other things in my life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it is a societal illness that we are told and fed that we can have it all, because there's just no way that you can have spinning plates for that long. I had my parents over from Ireland for a whole year. They came after their COVID lockdown. They just wanted a year of traveling and adventure. So they came to Australia. And even in that year, I went from kind of career work to being like, I don't know how to have family here. I don't know how to spend this much time balancing things. And it's been the most illuminating year of trying to suss out where that, and I don't agree with balance as a term, because it's not the right term, because there's never a balance, but just trying to suss out the dynamics, and also just where my cognitive energy is going, because it's very easy to deplete it on work and then have very little else to give. So you have to then be conscious. And I think exactly what you said, there is sacrifice, and it is a decision that many will make in terms of what they want to focus on. And every decision you make has some sacrifice within it. But I think it's about intent. And I think what you've described is you intentionally knew that this is what you wanted to go and do. This is the impact you wanted to have. This is how many people it's going to affect for the good. And so if we are intentional around it, I think that's constantly what I'm striving for, is the intent of what do I want to be doing. If you feel like you're a plastic bag floating in the wind of being pulled between everything, you're set for a life of dissatisfaction and exhaustion.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think for me, it's you're spot on. It's intent. It's clear decision making, it's prioritization, and it's honesty, being honest with yourself, that and being honest with others. My husband, for example, used to be quite upset with me that I don't do more in our social life. Yeah. And we had to have some serious conversations where I said, look, it's just not my priority. Yeah. And I need to be honest with you and with myself that that's not my priority. And so, that honesty, I think, goes a long way, rather than trying to do it all and pretending like it's all good.
100%. And I think there's so much power in that, because so many of us don't do that. They don't admit to ourselves or to others what we actually need and what our primary focus is going to be. And then we sit in shame, and then we sit in feeling like we're disappointing people. And there's so many layers that comes with that. So it's solid advice. I feel like I could sit here and talk to you all afternoon. I'm well aware of the fact that you are an extremely busy human. And so I don't want to take up more of your time, but thank you so much for jumping on with me today. I know this will be an amazing listen for all of our podcast listeners, and I'm very grateful to you for sharing your wisdom, which I was honestly taking notes, being like, I need to remember that myself. I need to feed this back to the team. So you already are making an impact, and we haven't even put it out in the world yet.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au.